Hey, everybody!
Peace, peace.
We are live, as promised. Sorry it was put off a couple times.
Right.
But this is the Saturn and Pisces Survival Seminar. My name is Janae Jones. I'm joined by my good friend and astrologer, Marie Rousseau. How you doing, Marie?
I am doing well, handling Saturn like a champ. I'm not, I lie, I'm just going with it.
I
Yeah.
understand.
I mean, just a point in case, the fact that we've had to delay this video broadcast for a couple of weeks
Yep,
just kind of
yep,
shows in line what it's like.
yep. Because I was so hell bent on doing this when Saturn went direct. And Saturn was
Right.
like, nah.
Right.
Sorry about that, everybody. But if you've been wondering about this transit, that's what this seminar is about. And if you have Pisces placements, you probably I don't know how to describe how people are feeling, Marie, but
We have a pretty good idea. Society shows that in a whole. If you pay attention to current trends, it's kind of telling itself, or it's indicating itself.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And for all of you that shared that beautiful post today that was by Marie, this is who wrote it.
Oh, yes.
About the 12th house and the 8th house. I just wanted to mention that so that people knew who you were.
Right. Thank you. Yes. And it's the Saturn and Pisces that draws me to keep warning people about being careful, because it's always the unseen Pisces, or the what we're not aware of, that usually bites us in the ass. So Saturn kind of says pay attention to those things that you don't normally pay attention to. So that was kind of
Yes.
the prompts lately on screaming duck in this war zone.
Yep. Duck and be careful when you're standing
Right.
back up because
Right.
I,
Definitely.
I have Saturn opposing my Saturn and just went back over my Mercury and is headed back to conjunction with my
Ooh.
Sun, activating my T square, my mutable T square. How
Oh my
fun!
God. Yeah. I'm surprised you have a smile on your face. I'd be at this seminar like, welcome.
Y'all want to know how it goes down? Well,
Right.
I'm trying to take it in stride, and hopefully, people can take something from this to understand that even if
Yes.
it's been a little heavy, rough, if there have been delays, if there have been things that kind of set you back, you're not alone. And we
Right.
want you to know what to expect. Also,
Yes.
for everybody watching, there is an accompanying workbook for what we're doing. I'm going to put it in the chat and also put it on the screen. I made a tiny URL so it would be easy for people to find. Hold on, let me put it in the chat. Okay, there we go. So if you're watching, you can download this, follow along. If you don't know your birth chart placements and such by heart, you might want to pull that up while you watch.
Right.
And I'm going to share screen here. Hold on, y'all. Oh my goodness. Why does this take so long? Okay. Here we go. Coming live to you guys. Should be popping up any second now. I always feel like I'm not efficient.
No, no, you're doing great.
But welcome to our seminar. We're going to be talking about Saturn in Pisces and also Saturn in general. So back in 2023, we originally did a seminar quite similar about this. Saturn entered Pisces on March 7, 2023, and it's going to stay there until May 24th, 2025. And then on August 31st, 2025, it will retrograde back into Pisces from Aries until February 13th, 2026. Now, oh, did my sound just go? I don't hear anything. Am I crazy?
No, I can still hear you.
Okay, I don't know what the background noise I had just disappeared and made me think I was alone. But we're going to cover some things here because I'm sure that people are familiar with Saturn and maybe a little bit scared of Saturn. I don't think
Yeah.
people should be. I have great respect for Saturn, even when he was whooping my ass during my Saturn return. And anybody with Saturn and Pisces natally, this is your Saturn return. I'd love to
Right.
hear from everybody how that's going.
Yeah, and I would also say that if it's any consolation, it'll never end. Saturn energy follows you for the rest of your life. So when you become accustomed to what it indicates, it doesn't mean that it's going to prevent anything. Ra has made a for anyone that's not familiar with Raku and cosmophysics, his one of my favorite analogies is he says it's like knowing the weather. You go outside with an umbrella, but it still doesn't stop the rain from pouring. So the more you get familiar with the idea of what the energy indicates, then you're just going outside with umbrellas from now on, not necessarily saying you won't get wet, but it at least allows some assurance of acceptance of what you're dealing with so that I don't know. I guess you don't take it so personal.
Yeah,
It's personal, but you don't take it too personal. It's like stubbing your toe. It hurts, and you're allowed to scream, and you're allowed to cry, and you're allowed to say, "Damn this dresser! Who put this here? It was me." Oh, okay. But then you're able to go. You don't go for the rest of your life hating your feet or hating
right.
the dresser.
Right. Because what good would that do? Things
Right.
happen. Saturn
Right.
reminds us of that. And I say I'm a continual student of astrology. So I wrote here that it's important as a student of astrology to look
Mm-hmm.
to the past to understand the patterns of specific transits. So we're going to be doing some of this here just to give you guys an overview. One of the great things about astrology is you can easily just look up when a transit happened. When was the last time that it happened? What was going on during that transit? Because you kind of get a little bit of a hint or a clue of how that operates as an energy, as a transit, and how it affected society. So we're going to take a look at what occurred in history when Saturn transited the mutable water sign of Pisces. And Marie, how's it feel being a progressed Pisces, Miss Ma'am?
Calming. After coming out of being Aquarius, it's definitely calming. Um, I will say that I do have to go with the flow more.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm at it's how do I explain it? Because I'm brand new. I'm a baby Pisces. I'm only at like 1 degree of
Mm-hmm.
progressed Pisces at this point. So I'm still getting used to my fins and gills. But swimming, going from the electrified movement of Aquarius, where I'm constantly like it's like living like a lightning strike.
Mm.
Being a progressed Aquarius. So everywhere I was going, I was just like, lightning strike, lightning strike here. And now I have to take a lot more things in stride, but it's not that I'm doing it. It feels like my perception of life is moving in that direction where I am really just observing more than trying to strike things, which is what I came from in the 30 years of being a progressed Aquarius. As a
Woo!
Pisces, how would you say that description is that pretty accurate?
Yes, I started out at 20 degrees of Pisces and I felt very calm and peaceful and kind of dreamy and in my own world, always reading something, writing a
Mm-hmm.
poem, listening to some music. And then when I was 10, I progressed to Aries and realized people are in competition with me and I didn't realize I was competing. It got
Ah, right.
really, really, really clear. It was interesting. But yeah, I would say that's the case. And you kind of, when did you progress again? Did you feel,
I progress the moment that Saturn also ingressed Pisces.
jeez, my gosh.
So I was getting used to my new progression. I'm like, oh yes, I'm gonna be Pisces, no more Aquarius. And then Saturn said, hold on. You're gonna start off as a tadpole. Did you think you were gonna be a shark coming right into
Oh,
this?
so you had
So
the experience of Saturn going over your progressed sun too when you were in
yes.
Aquarius.
Right, right. So it's it's slower. It's a lot slower. I feel like things are slower, and that I have more time to reflect more so than I've usually had. So I find myself, because natally I have Neptune in the third house, and then solarly I have Pisces in the third house. So I am in my head a lot, swimming in there. So there's
Yeah.
a lot of head swimming going on, where I have to remember to come up for air and remind people I'm still alive, because I'll stay down there. You've already seen I've taken a couple of breaks from social
Yeah.
media, whereas when I was Aquarius, I couldn't stay off it. I was constantly on it since like the dawn of social media. Oh my
Yeah.
God, I'm sharing my age. And then, and now, I find myself pulling back. The reading more, like you said, is something that's had. Not that I wasn't always an avid reader,
Right.
but I would say that progressing into Aquarius, I found myself not having the same kind of wanting to take the same kind of time to read, moving so quickly. So now in Pisces, I'm in my head a lot. I'm reading a lot. I want solitude more than ever. I want peace and quiet. I think I told you I just before we started that I actually went and bought noise canceling headphones, not the ones for music, just literally nothing. I want to hear nothing.
For her peace.
Right, just for peace of mind. And going into what you're going to bring us into with Saturn and stuff, that wanting peace and quiet and the inability in which to get it easily is a Saturn in Pisces transit.
Indeed. Indeed. Because Saturn is like, nah.
Yeah.
Pause for a second. Hold there.
Right.
So this is taking it back to when Saturn was in Pisces from February 1935 to January 1938. And during that time, we witnessed the rise of fascism in Europe, the Great Purge in the Soviet Union, the beginning of Mao Zedong's rise to power in China, and the devastating effects of the Great Depression in the US. Then there was a Saturn-Neptune opposition between 1936 and 1937. That was also in effect, and it reinforced the impact of the transit. God.
Yeah.
Miss Ma'am, could you imagine what it would have been like to be alive during this time?
It's very funny that you say that because for some reason I went and, well, I wouldn't say for some reason, but lately I've been drawn to the author Ayn
Mm-hmm.
Rand,
Mm-hmm.
who's an objectivist. And I read her first book that she published just recently and I finished it. And she actually published it in 1936. And it was about Soviet Russia. So even bringing that up to see like
Wow.
what it might have been like, even though it was a fictional story, the background was based off of her experience in living in Russia before she escaped. And I'm using the word escape from Russia to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And I can say that from what I've gathered from the background of that story, yeah, living through that time was very rough. Especially for people in certain Eastern European areas and Russia during
Yeah.
that time. And there was a lot of disillusionment, which is the Saturn and Pisces type of feel as well,
Yeah.
of people not knowing what to believe or being made to believe things, and then the deception thereof, and those feeling trapped. Trapped was probably a big theme that I got out of reading that book, which would describe exactly what people would feel, or if they have been, since Saturn has been in Pisces, isolation and feeling trapped. Because that's exactly how she described what it was like for Soviet Russia during that time, is that
Mm-hmm.
people felt like they were in a prison. And it was a prison that they couldn't escape. There was a lot of border control, and you weren't allowed to have, you had to get so much permission, go through so many obstacles or red tape just to be able to travel within the country itself. So I would say that just reading We the Living would give a pretty good idea of what a Saturn and Pisces transit was like, seeing that the Saturn-Neptune opposition in 1936, and she published the book in 1936, is a clear indication of what that energy
Wow.
entails. Yeah.
Wow. That tied in perfectly. I did see your books
Right.
talking about that as well. And the linkage, I guess, you had to her based on your own placements.
Yes. Yes.
I hope
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I hope in the future we're able to like kind of look deeper into that and have show people, how to even come across that information appropriately to see who they would align with and why. as far
Right.
as
Even as far
office.
as finding your teachers, or if there's a certain placement in your own natal chart that you're looking for restructuring or learning, then you can find people that put planetary placements by synastry, and listening to them will open up new doors or insights or enlightenment into that area in your chart that you have a planetary synastry with the other
Yeah,
individual.
such fascinating stuff. I was like, oh, I love it. And then in the US at that time frame, the Social Security Act was introduced to provide support for those struggling, and the Hoover Dam was completed. That's literal Saturn in Pisces, stopping water. Um, However, this transit also birthed some insidious programs and events like the Nuremberg Laws, the I always say this wrong, Lebensborn eugenics program, the Hitler Youth paramilitary organization, and the Ohio River flooding, which left many homeless and dead. I did have a conversation with you before about Saturn and Pisces and it hitting people with placements that had Pisces placements and them being like homeless. I've seen this with so many Pisces
Mm-hmm.
moons, it's not even funny. Like, I, I was just amazed. And
Yes.
when you said it, I started thinking about it. And it's almost every like Pisces moon I know that was experiencing that through this transit. Fascinating.
Right, right.
Addition,
Sagittarius rising as well.
yeah, there you go,
Yeah.
because it will be their fourth house transit. My
Mm-hmm.
goodness.
Mm-hmm.
If that's true from anybody, for anybody, hi Nisha. She said,
Yes,
hey
hey
from
Nisha.
Oakland.
Yay, area. Oh my
Yep.
God, it's been so long since I said that I feel weird. Okay.
You're allowed to still say it. You spent a lot of time of your life there.
Right.
But it's just fascinating that that even came up. And then it says, additionally, why Mercury and Pisces, come on, Janae, speak. There were a number of major events in various parts of the world, both positive and negative. In the UK, Edward VIII caused a constitutional crisis and abdicated the throne due to his relationship with Wallis Simpson, while in the Northeast, the people of Jarrow marched to London to protest poverty and unemployment. In
Mm-hmm.
Palestine, the people revolted against the British government and Jewish immigration. In Korea, Sun Young Moon had a revelation. Hold on, let's go to the next page from Jesus and founded Jesus, Pisces, just saying,
Mm-hmm.
and founded the Unification Church. Notably, Alcoholics Anonymous began in the US, which is
Mm-hmm.
very Saturn in Pisces.
Right.
Um, Culturally, this period was very significant too, with the invention of the Hammond organ, the release of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, because that was definitely considered to be a marvel in animation, especially at the time. The
Mm-hmm.
publication of Dr. Seuss's And to Think That I Saw It on Mulberry Street and of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck, as well as The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien and At the Mountains of Madness by H.P. Lovecraft. So, with Saturn's transit through Pisces from March, we're going to a different time frame now, March 1964 to March 1967. Revolutionary activity, coups, and uprisings were rampant. The Vietnam War escalated and sparked massive anti war movements around the world, with young men in the US even going so far as to burn their draft cards. This is interesting because we'll be approaching Saturn and Aries, and I can't wait till we can look forward to that and talk about
Right.
how it's going to go. But I'll especially be looking for things having to do with war or fighting
Mm-hmm.
or some sort of wrap up to this energy. Because if we look into the past, once we're at Saturn and Aries, I'm sure we'll find things that resonate with wrapping up some of these things.
Right.
In South Vietnam, 20,000 Buddhists protested against the military government. The civil rights and Black Power movements were also gaining traction in the US during this period. Martin Luther King led the Selma to Montgomery marches in 1965, and the Black Panther Party was formed the following year. Sadly, Malcolm X was assassinated, and the Ku Klux Klan committed multiple murders in Mississippi. Lyndon B. Johnson responded to these events by introducing the Great Society spending programs to reduce poverty and racial injustice. I will not get into what I think about all that right at the moment. That's a whole other conversation. But these are things that were occurring. The Civil Rights Bill was also passed in 1964. abolishing racial segregation in the US. And the Voting
Mm.
Rights Act was passed in 65, prohibiting racial discrimination in voting. The Social Security Act was also established, and it created Medicare and Medicaid. We're going to probably go into talking about health with current Saturn and
Right.
Pisces things too. Cuban refugees began to arrive in the US in October 65, and the freedom flights began in November. Now we're going to take it to South Africa. Nelson Mandela made his I am prepared to die speech at his trial in 1964, leading to his imprisonment. The following year, the Indonesian army executed millions of communists in genocide to prevent an attempted coup. Meanwhile, in China, the Cultural Revolution was in full swing as the CCP issued the May 16th notice in 1966 to justify the purges and forced reforms, and Mao became the focus of a personality cult. The revolutionaries used this little red book as a manifesto to purge unbelievers, destroying China's traditional culture and causing millions to be massacred, humiliated, or driven to suicide. My God.
Mm-hmm.
The 60s were an era of radical transformation and culture shock, especially in the US. We got a little bit while to go. I'm going to try to just read through this so we can get up to the 90s. I don't want to keep everybody too long. Astrologically speaking, the decade began with the conjunction of Saturn and Uranus, which was known as the Great Change. This
Yeah.
planetary alignment symbolized a period of great upheaval and change with many unexpected and seemingly unpredictable events. Some of these events included the flooding in the US in late 1964 and 65, the rise of pirate radio in the UK, the Beatles' domination of the US top 40, and the outlawing of LSD in the US, the hippies'
Mm-hmm.
flower power movement, the theft of the Little Mermaid statue in Copenhagen. Wow, this is a lot of stuff going on. I don't even think I really realized that had happened before researching this.
Right.
The recognition of bourbon whiskey as a distinctive product of the US, Bob Dylan's controversial switch to electric music, the Surveyor 1 sending thousands of photos from the moon, the miniskirt craze. I remember my mom saying,
Ew.
like, when she was growing up, you didn't like see people long skirts, short skirts. If minis were in, everybody had them on. And I always thought that was fascinating.
Oh
Didn't realize
wow.
it started around then. The formation of the Church of Satan, the
Oh
world
nice.
the world broadcast premiere of the Tom and Jerry cartoon. Yikes. The success of the movie The Sound of Music, Sidney Poitier becoming the first African American to win an Oscar for Best Actor, the premiere of the Star Trek TV series, and the first Mothman sightings in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. All in all, it was a tumultuous time full of dramatic events. And let me check out some of the comments.
Yes.
Elizabeth is here from Iowa. Hi. And Rosalie
Peace.
says, a lot of earthquakes going on right now. Yeah,
Yeah, California,
I
and
was
then the tsunamis.
I was taken off guard totally the other day seeing that news all late. Whoa. Glad you weren't
Right.
out there. I've only had earthquake experience in the Philadelphia area, and they were like, we were panicking, but it was nothing. Like
Yeah.
we just had one last summer, and before that, I think back in like 2011, and we don't know anything about earthquakes, so we were kind of like, what is happening? But
Yeah.
yeah, I did see the recent activity. So the next time frame that Saturn returned to Pisces was from May 1993 to April 1996. So this is when I'm showing my age here, when I was
Yeah.
13 to 16. If you were around those ages at that time, it would be interesting to know what was going on for you. But this saw the O.J. Simpson arrest and acquittal,
Mm-hmm.
the arrest of Fred and Rose West. Now I'm trying to remember who that was. Goodness. Kurt Cobain's unaliving of himself and the sinking of the MS Estonia. The economic fallout from Nick Leeson's rogue trading resulted in the collapse of Barings Bank, and the nuclear testing by France, missile testing by China, and the failed Israel-Palestine peace process all caused outrage around the world. Disruption to peace processes.
Mm-hmm.
Sound like something Marie just said at the beginning of this.
Right.
This period of Saturn in Pisces was also a time of great progress. Multiracial elections were held in both Burundi and South Africa, and Nelson Mandela abolished capital punishment in the country. Russia and China agreed to stop targeting each other with nuclear weapons, and the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty was extended indefinitely by 170 countries. The Australian government agreed to pay reparations to Indigenous Australians who were displaced during nuclear tests, and the Church of England ordained the first female priest. The Schengen Agreement went into effect to allow easy cross border travel in the EU, and the Channel Tunnel opened, connecting Britain to France. Construction on the Three Gorges Dam started in China, and the New Age spirituality movement went mainstream. The Dalai Lama proclaimed Gedin, I'm going to butcher this name. Oh, Marie. Gedin Shoki Naima. Oh, God forgive me. I hate saying names wrong. As the 11th Panchen Lama in 1995, but later that year, China endorsed their own version instead. So then we're up to 1993 with Prince announcing he was changing his name to a symbol in protest, prompting people to refer to him as Tafcap, the artist formerly known as Prince. This same year, the PlayStation video game system was launched, while the use of psychedelics and UFO culture surged, and the X-Files TV series debuted. The K Foundation, KLF, also made waves with their situationist art projects, most notably burning £1 million. I kind of remember that when it actually happened, even though I probably didn't care that much. That's so sad. Edvard Munch's iconic painting, The Scream, was stolen in Oslo, only to later be recovered. And the first photograph of Pluto and its moon, Charon, it's similar to Chiron, I guess, in how you pronounce it, was taken from the Hubble Space Telescope. Marmaduke Weatherall's photo of the Loch Ness Monster was exposed as a hoax, and the groundbreaking CGI dinosaurs of Jurassic Park were released, making it the highest grossing film for the next 4 years. That was really a big deal when that happened. CGI was like, what? Now we look back at things and my kids go, that looks old.
Yeah.
So groundbreaking when you were alive,
Right.
but in retrospect, it looks old. Also, The Lion King became the highest grossest animated film, and Schindler's List won a record 7 Oscars. Toy Story, the first full-length computer animated film, was also released, as was Waterworld, the most expensive film of its time. Didn't that film do terribly? It was the most expensive film of its time, and it did that bad? Holy crap. I remember people making fun of that movie, and I've never seen it. But that's probably why I've never seen it, because people were making fun of it.
Right.
Other paradigmic films from this period include Forrest Gump, The Shawshank Redemption, Ed Wood, Pulp Fiction, Interview with the Vampire, The Madness of King George, Immortal Beloved, Outbreak, The Prophecy, Leaving Las Vegas, and 12 Monkeys. From the music world to cinema, I almost said semina, goodness. 1993 was a year of seismic shifts in the cultural landscape, and it set the stage for an explosion of technology-driven advancements in entertainment industry and artistry, which continue to inspire creators across the globe to this day. This is important because when we would talk about like the movie industry or music, that would be attributed to Pisces.
Right.
So in the workbook, there's a little thing that we can do. I don't know how many people are watching live. Somebody said they're Rosalie, 1995 baby here, and I'm a Pisces. Hey, Rosalie. And Stephanie said she remembers so many of those things as a teen. Kurt Cobain, yep, that was when I was in high school. Now, here's something that you can do for fun. It's in the workbook. I have included a bunch of Saturn keywords and a bunch of Pisces keywords. Of course, there's more, but I chose the ones that I thought, were the most prominent. And you can go back over what we just reviewed and pick out the keywords. I can't express enough to people how important keywords are. Why am I disappearing?
Right.
I'm like flickering away. I don't care how long you've been looking into astrology or studying or practicing it. It always comes back down to some of them keywords. They never leave you, and you expand the list. My God, dude, am I a ghost?
Yeah. Are you Pisces? You're
I think
Pisces right now?
I am. What is happening? Okay. Well, it's a good
Is
thing I'm
it
not all big on screen. What do you
right?
think it
Is
could
it light?
be?
Do you have enough light?
Maybe it's that. Hold on. I think you were right.
Yeah. Ah.
Okay, got a little weird over here.
Right. You were disappearing on us.
But when we're talking about Saturn, here's some of the keywords that we're talking about. So remember them. You can add to this too, because of course, a lot
Mm-hmm.
of these words have other words that you could use in place of them. But we're talking ambition, authority, boundaries, career, effort, excellence. And I'm not even reading these in alphabetical order. I'm
Right.
reading down the rows. A fear. Now, this is interesting. Inhibition,
Mm-hmm.
job, karma, because Saturn is the planet of that, reality check, reliability, resilience, responsibility, self restriction, seriousness, caution. You mentioned that earlier.
Yes.
Coldness, conservation, to consolidate, contract, to control, law and order, lead, metal, limiting, long term, because this is the long hard road, mastery, material things, shadow, skeleton, status quo, strength, structure, cynicism, defense, denial, discipline, duty, negativity. Of course, Saturn bringing the
Right.
negativity. Old age, organization, patience, practicality, prudence, testing, be a little thrifty.
Mm-hmm.
This also is about time, vocation, wisdom, and work. And I have a quote here from George Bushner that says, "Revolution is like Saturn, it devours its old children," because Saturn certainly did swallow its babies.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for the Pisces keywords, of course, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with these. We're talking compassion, being adaptable, fantasy realm, creative, imaginative, intuitive, sympathetic, vulnerable, healing, transcendent, artistic, emotional, spiritual, mysticism, visionary, music or musicians, dreams or a dreamer, sensitivity, glamour, movies, escapism, and I put them in negative and positive columns.
Right.
Delusions, illusions, which a lot of people I feel like had a lot of those shattered when
Right.
Saturn went direct. Because when it was retrograde, I've seen a lot of people explain this, but I kind of like the way that you talk about it best, Marie, in that
Mm-hmm.
like it was basically halting some of the free flowing Pisces stuff, so to speak.
Right. Like giving retrogrades, I like to look at as, you know, a second chance to kind of go over what
Mhm.
Saturn had already visited. So, if you think about a retrograde like being in a car, if you want to talk about like the energy of what you're dealing with, when it's direct, you're just driving forward. You're running over speed bumps, hitting old people that are crossing the road. You're just driving. But if you ever drove a car in reverse, you take your time, while you're going backwards, you're kind of looking over your shoulder, you're driving a little bit more slower,
Mhm.
you're going, when you miss the exit that you need to take a left to go to someone's address. So when you reverse, you're kind of slowing down so you can read the signs a little bit. So I like to look at retrogrades as giving like a second chance to kind of go, okay, I went over these degrees, I went over these planets already. What did that indicate for me? Let me shape up some of this shit because I didn't do it quite right the first time. And then when it goes direct, you're kind of going like, oh, okay, now I know where I'm going, full speed ahead till you get to the place that you haven't addressed yet, and then you're wishing for for a retrograde so you could do it over.
Like, let us go back, please.
Right.
But I think it's fascinating to look at it that way because, people get a little nervous mostly about Mercury being retrograde. But,
Mm-hmm.
any retrograde is providing that time frame that you're talking about. It's just that Mercury happens very, very often. So
Yes, very often.
no wonder people are there. There's also just some information about Pisces in here that I put in here, like some things if you don't already know that you should know because it really helps.
Mm-hmm.
Why is my light deciding no? I am not there anymore. Okay. It's because my
Because it
screen is dark. That's what it
ah
is. But another thing that we wanted to cover, we talked about different times that Saturn has been in Pisces and we know it's here now. However, most people are not aware of the Saturn cycles. And I remember when I first found out about them, I couldn't stop going back in time, or as I call it, just time traveling through my astro gold, because I was looking at certain time periods, trying to see. It's okay that you're late, Serena. You can run it back. No problem. But it was one of those things that I was like, holy crap, I could actually see the indications by each Saturn cycle and what was going on in my life. And then to take it a step further, like my mom Saturn squares mine. She's Saturn in Sagittarius. So every time I'm having a Saturn motion, she's having a Saturn motion. It's just a
right.
different Saturn motion. And that allowed me to kind of like look at me growing up. Saturn's the ruler of my moon anyway. And go, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. So of course, everybody knows Saturn natally is where Saturn was when you were born.
Right.
And then, roughly what, 7 to 8 years later, you have your first Saturn square.
Square. Mm-hmm.
Now, I love the way Marie describes things. I always say squares are opportunities for growth. And since we're talking about Saturn, once you look at it more so as like you kind of grew up a little bit or had additional things maybe expected of you at each one of these cycles. These are like tough interactions between, you know, Saturn in the sky and your natal Saturn. So they're presenting opportunities for you to mature.
Right. Yeah. Well, Saturn is the maturity planet. It's Big Daddy coming through to basically tell you to grow up. So the Saturn cycles and this particular cycle here that you're speaking about, the every approximate 7 years, if one were to look at their life every 7 years, you're being asked to grow up. You're being asked to let go of what you were doing 7 years before because now you have to do more grown up things. So from the birth to 7 years old, well, when you're 7 years old, and you see it a lot, even in families, when a child is 7, you start hearing this, you're not a baby anymore. No,
Hmm.
you can't have a binky. No, you can't have a bottle. No, you're getting too big for me to pick up. So, and they're still trying to be like, baby me, baby me. And you're going, no, I can't. You're too big now. I can't lift you. Or no, you're not a baby anymore. You don't play with baby toys. It's time to start learning how to read now. It's time to start learning how to write. You have pick up your toys, clean up your room. So that's the first Saturn square that typically everyone goes through, which is basically saying you can't be a baby and now it's time for you to go to the next stage of your life.
Yep, most definitely. And in keeping with more growth, by the time you have your Saturn opposition, you're a teenager.
Yes.
Yay, how fun. Do teenagers not push the limits of adulthood? I'm sure we all did
Right.
in some way.
And not doing the little kid thing anymore. Now it's time to put the army GI Joes down and the Barbie dolls down. We're going to school dances. We're starting to date. We're starting to wear makeup or do our whoever had privilege to. I know some of
Yeah.
us during our Saturn oppositions got to find out if our parents were strict or or if they just created boundaries in which for us to follow. But at the Saturn opposition, now it's time to let go of you're not 7 anymore. You're not a little kid, is what you start hearing. It's time for you to start getting ready to think about college.
Gosh, like what an interesting time, especially now that I think about it. Saturn in Pisces, this opposition last happened to me in the 90s as a teenager, and there's still some reminiscent themes. Like it's interesting, like to stand up for yourself as an adult during your Saturn opposition doesn't work too well because you're not an adult yet. But
Right.
having some of the same themes come up in terms of how I took authority over myself. Definitely are showing back up. And then
Right.
after that opposition as a teenager, when you're around like 21, 22, you're having another Saturn square. And I know everybody goes, you're 18, you're grown, or you're 21, you're grown, but our brains don't fully form until we're about 25. However, by the time you're 21, you're probably having to face responsibilities you've never had to deal with before.
Right. Yeah,
It's
this is
different.
the age where, because I'm using the whole letting go thing here theme, so I might as well keep going. But the 21 is that you're not it's not school dances anymore, it's clubs. It's not just hanging out with your friends and being completely sober, though some of us weren't when we were teenagers. But now it's like I can buy alcohol. You have to be home at a certain time. Those boundaries that were on us as a Saturn opposition when we wanted to break free. Now it's like, okay, you are free to go do these things, but then now the consequences come from the world. So
Yeah.
it's not just within your school or with your family. This time, if you get in trouble, you'll be dealing with the law, or this time, if you make a mistake, it can have ramifications for your future. This is where people are now starting to go into college if they're going to college, or trade, or they have to work now. Now you have to have a job
Yeah.
while people are thinking about how am I going to buy the things that I need for myself, because now I am no longer a teenager, I'm no longer a kid, and I'm no longer a baby. So that's when we get to that second Saturn square.
Yes. And if your natal Saturn is in a mutable sign, so we're talking Gemini, we're talking Sagittarius, we're talking Virgo. Of course, you're having a Saturn return if your Saturn's in Pisces, but you're in a Saturn cycle right now.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the things that it's important to look at so that you can. I mean, I know we're kind of halfway through this transit now, but it's still very important to kind of see if there's any themes that are theming towards Saturn and Pisces stuff. And the house that you have your Saturn into lets you know the area of life affected. Then, of course,
Mm-hmm.
people have their Saturn return, which we hear described very interestingly online in these astrology streets. Mine was absolutely horrible, but I wouldn't change a thing. Like
Right.
it's the worst. It was the worst time frame of my entire life. However, in keeping with responsibility, it showed me I had to be responsible for what I was standing on. Was I building things from a place that best benefited me instead of sacrificing myself to other people, as I have a tendency to do as a sixth house Pisces sun. So that was interesting. But if anybody's in their Saturn return, or if you can identify which Saturn cycle you're in, please put it in the chat and let us know. This is just reiterating what we just said. So
Mm-hmm.
Saturn at birth, of course, is commonly linked to our fathers and or father authority figures in our lives. During childhood, the rules, regulations, and discipline that we were subjected to by these figures, such as parents and teachers, were not always enjoyable, but were necessary at times. The position of Saturn in our birth charts can highlight areas where we encounter energetic obstructions. It's interesting because when I think about it, I have Saturn in the 12th house, and my
Mm.
biological father was largely absent. He disappeared for eight
Right.
years and then came back when I was 16 at my Saturn opposition. So he
Mm-hmm.
was gone from square to opposition. I'm just thinking of this now. Your first Saturn square is around the age of 7. This initial Saturn cycle marks our growing comprehension of authority and our introduction to logic and linear thinking. We leave behind the babyish things we enjoyed and graduate to a new level of childhood. Like I can think of when my children crossed that threshold and started having this cycle, some of the toys that they were really like insanely interested in. It's
Mm-hmm.
a baby toy.
Right.
Nobody plays with that. Like, I'm pretty sure by this time my daughter stopped watching Dora the Explorer, which had become
Right.
Dora was like an adopted child because she was so prevalent in my household from the time my daughter first saw her. So, if you have children too, this is important to look at because you'll
Yes.
know what stage they're going through and how you can best support them. Then, of course, your Saturn opposition when you're a teen. It's characterized as a period during which we examine our own sense of self and confront external influences that challenge us. That's an interesting thing because you mentioned, like, a lot of people were drinking when they were teenagers and,
Mm-hmm.
and doing all sorts of things. And a lot of people experience that firsthand because someone in their peer group
Right.
It's like
Pressure.
peer pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you were that person in the peer group that was pressuring
Pressuring.
all your
Right.
peers.
Either happens to you or you do it to someone else.
Right. Your influence at that time counts. But this is typically a time where teenagers push the limits of authority in search of personal autonomy and to test the limits of adulthood. Now, I did want to mention, I know Saturn is something people are scared of.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, it's seen as a malefic, but Saturn don't just want to punish you.
Right.
It wants you to do your work. It wants you to be
Yes.
integrous. It wants you to take responsibility. It wants you to be prepared. It wants you to do your due diligence.
Exactly.
So when Saturn comes and checks you, the best way that you can handle it is by doing those things. You know,
Exactly.
don't buck up with Big Daddy Saturn. You don't.
Pay tribute to the Saturn god
I don't know
by
what you're
doing
gonna
work. By doing
sacrifice.
work.
Yes. Before you do your work, you can go, look, Saturn, look what I am doing in your honor.
Right.
You're studying, you're preparing for whatever the case may be. And then at 21, that second Saturn square we spoke about typically occurs then. And it's when individuals prepare to complete usually their college education or embark on their professional journey and become fully financially responsible for themselves. Not everybody does, but there's so many
Right.
people that could have been doing that a little bit before the time. But this is
Mm-hmm.
typically an age where it's common to see people having to step up and
Right.
take care of themselves. Yes, things can be different depending. And then, of course, your Saturn return.
Mm-hmm.
Is this the true adulthood test, would you say?
Yes, I would definitely say it's especially if you're looking at it in a sense of there are probably two great milestones of being a human minus the birth. So minus you getting here as being something great. But getting to the age of the Saturn return where you're truly settling into I'm grown for the rest of my life, and then finally reaching the second Saturn return, fortunate to those who do,
Mhm.
with it happens around the age of like 56, so hopefully all of us here will see that age. But it is the now you are coming into accepting that you are now getting ready to age out, so it's like you come into the world, then you settle in the
Mhm.
world, then you start preparing to leave the world. So Saturn returns, and if you would consider like the birth, the return of your first Saturn, right? Which is why you
Mhm.
can even have one. So I would say Saturn returns are pretty significant.
Definitely. I love the way that you put that, especially thinking about it later in life.
Mm.
So when I said there's many phrases people could make for keywords from Pisces put with Saturn, but I wanted to be a little bit hopeful.
Yeah. Yes.
Build your dreams. What do we need to do stuff like that? Well, we can't just sit here and daydream away. Oh, I want to do this. It looks like that. The imagination is where all things start, right? Of course. But you got to do the work,
Mm-hmm.
whatever that would entail. And Saturn is also, I would say, about finding out what you have to do. Because how can you do your due diligence if you don't know what your due diligence is?
Right.
What needs to be done? So Saturn doesn't ask us to give up our dreams, only to make them real. That's a quote from Stephen Forrest. Now, Marie was kind enough to come up with a bunch of strategies that can help you. I know people are going through a lot right now, and I'm going to go back to the comments and kind of check what people are saying. Hold
Yes.
on, I'll scroll back a while. Oh, y'all was chatting it up, and I wasn't even over here looking. I'm so sorry. So let's see. We've got a 1995 baby. Somebody born the same year as me. Shout out Stephanie, 1980. Rosalie said, I feel calm lately, like I know what to expect. I'm in it at it as it is, I guess. Wait, am I reading that wrong? I'm in it is what is energy, sticking to my goal. I'm sorry. I completely butchered that. Crystal has Venus in Pisces, so Saturn's going over it, and it
Mm-hmm.
made her want to leave her man for a second. She said,
Yeah.
well, kind
I
of
have Venus and Pisces too, so I could tell you some things.
just coming all over, making y'all be like, to y'all
Screw it.
relationships. What the hell is happening over here? Rosalie said the words are hitting hard. Um, Crystal says Pisces is also in her third house, so she's ready for Saturn to get
Out
her
of
out of
her,
her head.
yeah. Yes.
How do you cope with that? I mean, I kind of understand. I'm a natal Mercury in Pisces, and then I have Neptune in the third house, so I feel
Mm.
like it's like a double whammy of that.
Yeah. As much as it is in confliction with the idea of keeping thoughts and words private, they have to come out some kind of way, is the only way that I can find. And I believe that I can attribute that to the lesson that I learned, because with all of that, because I have Mercury conjunct Neptune in the third house as well, is I also have Chiron and Gemini.
Hmm.
So being able to speak, being able to talk, being able to write, being able to get those thoughts out in some shape, form, or fashion has been healing to that wound of being stuck in one's head. So even if you're not sharing it to someone else, then I would recommend, yes, most definitely have a journal. If you're not a journal type, this is going to sound crazy because it's supposed to, because that Mercury conjunct Neptune. But and I'm gonna say it. I'm just gonna say it. Use AI. Oh my God, I said it. You're not a journal type of person, but the idea is to have something that you can communicate thoughts or words with. If you can't do it with yourself, use technology to do it. If you're not going to use technology, find someone you trust to talk to, find a therapist to talk to. But it's kind of there's this old story that I read. Forgive me, I forgot what it was called. It was a short story, but it was basically about a man who never forgot anything, and he remembered everything he read. And the problem was is that it was slowly killing him, because the more thoughts and the more information, because he was so scared to read anything or have any conversations, because the more information in his head, it was causing him to have these piercing migraines that were slowly taking his life. Until one day he was at a library and he runs into a woman who also has the same affliction. And then that's when she told him that you have to dump it. You have to dump it. It's always going to refill. But if you have write your own books, write something, do something, and dump it, because, to give you space to fill in, and it kind of saved his life. So that's what I would give as an advice for, especially while Saturn is there. Saturn is pressure. So all your thoughts will be pressure. And to do work, you have to release it. You have to learn to let it go and to get those thoughts out. So that's how I've been dealing with staying in my head. Like I said at the beginning, I have to remember to come up for air.
Yeah.
And even though social media may not always be the best place, it still is one of my many outlets to be like, okay, let me release something, let me share a thought, let me engage, let me get the words out so that I can then refill them back up and deal with the pressure over and over until I find something that works.
I like that. You gotta
Yeah.
release it. Give some space internally. I just found an app that I've been using called Honestly. I don't think I'm using it as you're intended to, but it lets you like voice journal. And I kind of
Ah,
did this before just with voice notes, but then the problem would be if I didn't they're saved by date or whatever, but I'm not going to remember this. But this uses AI. Even though I know a lot of people are scared of it, I embrace it.
right.
Um, you can literally, instead of having to write, you can just talk, and it tracks your days.
Mm.
And then
Oh,
it says stuff back to you too about, oh, well, I'm glad that were able to do this, and the other thing that day. It gives you insights after you use it for a certain amount of time. And I use it and talk about what was transiting or like what happened, and like kind of using it as an astro and regular journal, but stuff like that I think would be helpful. You can even do that
yes.
with Chat GPT if you want to. You have a
Yes.
live conversation with it. You can do that with Gemini for Google as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. So anyway, any type
Many
of release,
options.
right?
Yeah, just get it out your head. Someone else who was this that said they had Saturn and Virgo, Serena, then you're going through a Saturn opposition just like I am.
Yes.
Ooh, someone has Saturn and Pisces, 29 degrees conjunct Chiron. She said, fuck aging out. Oh gosh, with the conjunction to Chiron too, my goodness. I'd love to see that whole chart. Um, Ashley said that your Saturn return is your cosmic initiation into cronehood. I love that. The why, like, think
Yes.
of the cycles. Like, I know Saturn has kind of like a masculine energy to it, but it rules Capricorn, and that's a feminine sign. And I think of the wise crone, the woman who has all the answers because she's had all the wisdom and the experience and, all of that. So, yeah, I agree with that. Thank you guys so much for
Yeah.
participating. Goodness
Oh, and if I
gracious.
can add something to that, into just as a an understanding, because I did it myself, and I've seen other people who recently came out of the Saturn return in Aquarius do it too. The Saturn cycle that you were speaking about is very important because it is the lesson for that initiation. So when you're first born, right, and you have your Saturn placement, and Saturn is making that first approximate 28 years until the Saturn return, that is like the teaching you to be a human. You're here as a baby, so now you're learning how to eat, you're learning how to walk, you're learning how to engage with society, you're learning how to go through puberty, you're learning how to grow up. So when you have the Saturn return, sometimes I hear that, oh, I have my Saturn return, I'm done. This is your first time being an adult for real. You've
Yeah.
never been one. So you still are going to go through your next Saturn square after that again, which is going to or reiterate the themes that you went through in your Saturn return, just to see how much you learned from
Yep.
being an adult. How are you doing as being an adult? So the next 28 years is now you're learning to be grown. And then when you get to your second Saturn return, it's like now you're old. So now you're going to have to learn how to be the matriarch or the patriarch or the grandfather or the grandmother of whatever community or society that you create for yourself in your life. And you're going to learn what that is and what that entails for hopefully the next 28 years after. So yes, I will say that is definitely the initiation to the crone, but it is not the crone yet until you complete that next 28-year cycle. And then you know what it is to be an adult.
That that is very true. If you just stepped into a room, you haven't walked all the way through it yet. So you're absolutely
Right.
correct. One of your strategies you gave was perspective, and I think that's essential with anything we're dealing with. So, it's essential to remember that it's not what is happening to you, but your perspective about it that matters. That sounds cliche, but believe me, perspective is everything with that. Saturn's transits are not personal attacks. Let's repeat that because they feel sometimes to people like personal attacks. Saturn's transits are not personal attacks, but opportunities to restructure how you approach and respond to situations. By shifting your mindset and seeing these experiences as lessons, you can make the most of them and grow. Like, even if you have to remind yourself of that in the middle of being like, what the heck is going on here? Like, why is my life
Right.
on that part? Damn you, Saturn shakes fist at sky. Like, no. Your perspective is everything, loves. Patience.
Oh, yes.
Who isn't like really full of a bunch of patience right now? Who really needs to hear this? Because it's vital during Saturn's transit. Rome was not built in a day, and breaking down old structures and creating new ones takes time. Remember, it's over once the transit has completed its travels through the sign. So instead of feeling overwhelmed or defeated, use this time to learn and grow and trust that you will emerge more robust and resilient. Step faith in yourself. You can endure those difficult trials. Again, I don't want to kill people with toxic positivity, but I think that it's my trials that have made me who I am. Like, made
Yes.
me the most proud of navigating life. Self compassion. Oh my God. The love you've given other people, the compassion that you're giving other people, are you lacking it for yourself? During Saturn's transits, it's common to feel like we're not meeting our own expectations, especially facing challenges or setbacks. It's important to remember that growth is a process and that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes.
Yes.
Saturn's not going to punch you for making mistakes, but if you keep making the same mistake, it's going to keep giving you the same lesson until you learn it. It's important to remember that growth is a process. It's okay to make mistakes and experience setbacks. Instead of beating ourselves up, we should focus on being disciplined and committed to our growth. This means recognizing our weaknesses and areas of improvement and actively working on them. Do the work.
Yes.
Self reliance. It
It's a big one
is a big
for
one.
Saturn.
Your
It's like
responsibility tests are huge. Go ahead, Marie. I'm sorry.
no, no, it's okay. It's like at the same moment that we want to be positive, self-reliance is the is the one that seems the most unpositive positive thing to do.
Yeah.
Cuz you're not going to want to hear that no, it's not everyone else. It's you.
You. You can't put that off on somebody else. It wasn't their
Right.
responsibility. It was yours.
Right.
Yeah, that hits people hard, I think. But we may face challenges that test our ability to rely on ourselves and become more self-sufficient. However, it's important to remember that everyone is on their own journey and not everyone is at the same stage of growth or development. It's easy to become frustrated with others who may not be as reliable or self reliant as we would like them to be. However, practicing empathy and understanding is essential as everyone has unique struggles and challenges, even you. So be compassionate to yourself. But Saturn does want you to be able to rely on yourself. What are you responsible for in your life? If you're facing a Saturn cycle right now, I hope you're asking yourself that.
Right.
Because if you're not present to it, how can you do the work? It's just going to compound, and come back later. These cycles do not play. Momentum. Even though Saturn in Pisces is kind of like, yeah, no breaks for you. No sleep for you. No nap for you. And I hate hearing that as a Pisces because I love a nap. Try to have one daily. Resting and taking breaks can help you avoid burnout, reduce stress, and improve your overall well being. However, it's important to balance rest with forward momentum. That's so important. Making progress, no matter how small. You can actually I can't talk, Mercury and Pisces. You can congratulate yourself or set up some sort of game that you play with yourself for getting things done, even if they're small things. Like if you're like low on energy, a lot of people suffer from different conditions and stuff that doesn't give them the energy that either they used to have or that they're expected to have. It can feel like hell when you have stuff to do and you're like, I can't get anything done. Then you beat yourself up. No, reward yourself somehow, even if it's a small congratulations. If you can get something done and check it off the list, you've made some
Yeah.
momentum. So small steps forward make a big difference over time. So it's important to keep moving forward and taking action towards your goals. Don't just stay in your head about them, even when you don't feel like it. I'm just going to pause right there, even when you don't feel like it. I am listening to this myself as I'm saying it, going, even when you don't feel like it. Yes, I heard you. Remember that every step counts and that small wins can add up to significant improvement over time because that's true. Saturn isn't telling you to run fast, okay? And it's not telling you that. Do what you need to do. If it takes a while, so what? You got it done.
Right.
Caution! No, this is the third time this word is popping up this evening. Especially the post that Marie made. If you didn't see it, I shared it last on the page. Saturn is associated with caution and thinking things through before making decisions or taking actions. It's essential to do that. Rushing into things without considering the consequences can lead to mistakes, setbacks, and missed opportunities. Instead, take the time to weigh the pros and cons of different options and consider the potential outcomes of your actions.
Yes.
Saturn doesn't.
Especially while Saturn is in Pisces.
Oh my
Pisces is the
gosh.
reflection. So it's
Oh.
actually there. They consider, or what is known in astrology, Saturn being in the 12th house, being Saturn. The joy of the 12th house is Saturn being there. It's the perfect time for reflection. to be able to think, to take the time to go over there, because Pisces is reflection. And what do you need in order to do that? Time. You know, you need to be slow in which to accomplish it rightfully. So this is the perfect time to reflect, to really sit back and go, okay, where did I go wrong and why? And let me be self-reliant and take responsibility and try to make changes and move slower next time. Yeah, I know that
Yes.
I am killing fire signs right now. What do you mean move slow?
Fire dominant people, you have my
Right.
condolences. But it does really help. She's right. You know, being able to take the time to reflect, to slow down. You're making sure that you crossed all your T's and dotted all your I's, that you're prepared. And you know, there's no better feeling than doing all of the work and then accomplishing it. Even
Right.
though my Capricorn moon, I could accomplish something huge. I only enjoy it for like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And then I'm trying to do something else.
Right.
But even for that 30 seconds, the hard work, dedication, and taking the time to be careful and purposeful helps. Definitely helps. I think I'm at the end of the workbook. Yes.
Yes.
In the workbook, too, there's an additional section where you can track. I didn't put it up here because it didn't make sense to. You can track Saturn interacting with your chart. There's parts of it for you to fill out. So again, it's the tiny URL that's in the chat, and also tinyurl.com/SGC Saturn in Pisces. I don't want to keep y'all forever. I definitely don't want to keep Marie forever. She got
Oh.
family to deal with. I
We're
got
okay.
Yeah, I got food.
But I get it.
I
No.
want to eat. Does anyone in the chat have any questions before we are done here?
Let's see. What do we have in here? Oh, to Rosalie Bell saying, she says she has Mars is retrograde, and she hears it's rare. Mars goes retrograde about approximately every 2 years. These retrogrades are a little more common than people like to give credit for, unless it's outer planets. But even the outer planets will retrograde multiple times through their entire cycle. So yeah, just wanted to make a note of that. Yeah.
I was born with Mars retrograde too.
Yeah.
I have every planet retrograde in my chart except for Neptune and Venus.
I think someone else said that too, that they have a lot of retrograde planets. It also, I would say, and you, since you have a lot of retrograde planets, you can confirm.
Mhm.
It really comes into play with progressions. So if you go to school, if you think about your peers and all the school age children, you typically all have the same planetary placements because you're all born within the same
Same.
year,
Right.
or year or two. And if you were born with them retrograde, when it comes to progression, so let's say my Mars and your Mars are in the same house and sign, but my Mars is not retrograde, when my Mars is going to progress to the next sign faster than yours will.
Right.
So when I'm older, it's going to seem like, my motivation, my ambition to something is in something completely different. And you'll be looking at me like, I thought you was my ace boon coon. Like, we used to do the same thing, and now you on to something else. And I'll be like, how come you haven't caught up yet? Like, why are you still on the same old Mars stuff? Like, you'll really see the difference when it comes to retrograde with dealing with people who were born very close to the same age as to what you're on as you get older, like what your interests are and where you're going based on those retrograde planets. So that's where you can see it the most.
That's funny because I'm thinking about it from the aspect of I have grand earth trines, so I don't think when I was younger I put a lot of energy or effort into stuff. It just certain things came easier to me, like school and like all the work that you had to do. And now you're gonna make me look and see within my progressions when that Mars started moving forward, how long it took.
Right.
Because I think I can guess when that was. I want to see if I'm right. Based on pulling
Right.
the chart. Like when
Well, it's
I caught up.
fortunate you get more time with it than, somebody whose planet quickly progressed into the next sign. It didn't spend too much time getting all of the lessons of the sign that it was natally in. So I see, if there's the fortunate thing about having a retrograde planet is that you get more time with that planet. You get
Yeah,
with that energy in that sign while someone else has moved on.
that is a fascinating way to
Yeah.
look at it. You're welcome. Is that Rochelle?
Yes.
He
Hey,
said,
peace, queen.
thank you so much. No, you can always replay it. It's also on YouTube. Please, everybody, I
Hmm.
put the workbook in there so you can look through it, contemplate some things, kind of track Saturn. And also, if anybody is looking for more information about their Saturn placement, your cycles or whatever, I'm offering Saturn readings just specifically for that. So when the broadcast is over, I'll put the link to those also in the chat if you're interested, because I know this can be a lot to navigate, but our hope is that somehow, looking at this through a practical lens, it makes more sense, because when you can see astrology in everything in everyday life, it becomes more practical and less of just this thing that we talk about online because everybody thinks it's funny and cool or interesting. No, there's really some stuff here for you.
And I'll also add too, just for future reference, because obviously Saturn's going to keep moving and planetary placements are going to keep changing. So there will be other webinars and seminars that we do.
Yes.
So I highly recommend that when we do the ticketed versions of these, that you join, because that we do tackle personal placements one on one with everyone who attends there, and it
Yep.
gets a little bit more detailed. So we want to do a check in this time to kind of like let everyone know what's going on, because it's, it's pertinent information for
Yeah.
everyone. But they are a lot more detailed. We do take a lot more time individually to deal with people in those webinars. So that's just future reference to keep
Yeah.
an eye out for when we drop them in the future.
Thank you for saying that, Marie, because that's so
Yes.
important. And it's in a different format. You're not live for
Yes.
all of Facebook to see. We're in,
A
a
group,
Google Meet
right?
together.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we're gonna be doing Pluto and Aquarius because that's a lot more. But please be on the lookout for when we post about that, because these are opportunities for you to really get in and get some personal attention in
Right.
situations such as this. But I did think this will be helpful. We've got some time left yet with Saturn and Pisces. It'll be going into Aries, and we'll talk about that when it comes up.
Oh, yes. That should be fun.
So even if you were late, you can catch the replay. I want to thank everybody for just being an amazing group of people to have a page, have you guys follow, because
Yes. Thank you.
never a dull moment. And thank you so much for joining us this evening. All right, we're going to get out of here. I'm going to go eat.
Yeah. Peace, everyone.
My Venus and Taurus is hungry.
I know that's right.
Good night,
Bye.
everybody. Okay.
Is it off?